Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and
Wait,
awesomeness.
did you actually start recording?
I did while you
Oh,
were gone.
okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
No, you're fine. Take two. Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we return to the Stephen King Retrospective. This is a show that we have been doing for so many years. We just keep coming back to Stephen King because Stephen King keeps coming back to us. This week we're talking about It, Chapter 2, directed by Andy Muschietti. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, editor of this summer's Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony. Howdy. And also in Austin, writer of the long-running underground comic series Halloween Man and winner of the 2018 Best of Austin Award from Austin Chronicle, Mr. Drew Edwards. Say hello.
Beep, beep, Jason.
Beep, beep. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Don't look at the deadlights.
Don't look at the deadlights. Actually, I love that, and yeah, we will get to the big lights. Okay, in It Chapter 2. This is the 2019 American supernatural horror sequel to the 2017 It. It is amazing to me that the last one was literally 2 years ago, and it is based on the 1986 novel Stephen King, directed by Andy Muschietti, written by Gary Dauberman. Takes place 27 years after the first one, and we have a whole new cast of, with flashbacks to the kids, but these are new actors who are playing the adult versions of the kids: Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader, Isaiah Mustafa, Jay Ryan, James Ransom, Andy Bean, Bill Skarsgård, who is the freaktastic Pennywise, the dancing clown. That's a heck of a cast. I mean, really, truly, that is a good get, that cast. So the film just came out. Let's get our opening thoughts. We never, ever start with Julia. So let's do it this way. Let's go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go. Julia, what are your opening thoughts about It Chapter 2?
Well, I disagree that you never ever start with me, but it has been a while. I found the movie to be scary, but also there was a lot of things I didn't like about it. There was pretty problematic in some regards, as far as some kind of social stuff that we'll talk about, some choices that they make about how they treat the gay characters, how they treat the black character, how they treat the girl, and then also just I thought the ending was stupid, but I did think it was scary. Yeah,
Right.
well, that is the theme of the movie. I did think it was scary. I do think the acting is great. I really enjoy Bill Hader in this a lot. I think he was a lot of fun. So yeah, well, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All right, can't wait. Drew, where do you come in on that?
I don't think this was quite the slam dunk that the first one of these was, but I still think this is a very enjoyable continuation. And if you like the first movie, I think you'll find this to be a satisfying continuation of what the previous one was. Last adaptation of It goes. I thought a lot of the way they chose to play on stuff that was in the previous, plus the miniseries version, and then of course the novel. Some of the stuff they chose, the way they chose to play that in this movie was very interesting, because I believe when we recorded the first. The one on It Chapter 1, I said that I felt like that was a movie that was very much about grief. Well, this movie to me was very much about trauma, and even the way they portray the idea of people repressing memories from their childhood because something bad happened to them feels very much like stuff that happens to people who are abused or been through trauma or has post-traumatic stress disorder. And I found that very fascinating. So once again, much like with It Chapter 1, I found this to be a very cathartic movie. There was a couple of times where I, like, no joke, ugly cried during this movie. and great cast, great acting. They did a really good job, adult actors with the kid actors, and some of the ones were, I wasn't even expecting them to go quite that in depth with it, but I think this was, like I said, while I do have some issues with it, and we will get into that, and there's definitely stuff that I feel like, that the miniseries probably did a little better than this version. I still think that this was a very worthy adaptation, and actually, I disagree about the ending. I think the ending is actually an improvement on the miniseries, and dare I say, kind of an improvement on the book in some ways.
It's
Yes,
worth
I went
mentioning.
there.
So you've read the book, right? You did
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And I have not. It is with great shame that I say I've read my way through the entire Dark Tower, but I have never read the book yet.
For real?
For real?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
I haven't read it in years, but I do have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have it. I just haven't read it. So I know Julia has not read it. Drew has read it. Tony's read it. I take it. And Tony, in fact, what are your thoughts on this film?
I overall like the film. I didn't find it nearly as scary as the first one, and it was kind of touted that it was going to be. I think I will say the disclaimer that I haven't read the book in years, so maybe I'm misremembering, but judging on how it's also portrayed in the miniseries, I found that missing the character's significant others, I felt that menace, that human menace was missing. It also, having them missing kind of takes away from the idea that Pennywise is kind of more far reaching than perhaps, and that I thought was interesting. Also, the bully characters just kind of in and out, and that part, like, they decided to go more supernatural menace, and I don't think that really is as scary once you've seen a full other movie of that, in the way that they did it. But again, that's me, and I could be also, like I said, misremembering how important that was in the book, but I was very much affected by those parts when I read it. I read it a couple times, but I missed that. I thought it was good. I mean, the cast is amazing. The effects are great. There's a lot of great parts, but I'm kind of with Drew that a lot of it works well, but I didn't find it as affecting as the first one.
My feeling was there are a couple things that I thought were emotionally very satisfying and really cool, such as stuff involving Bill's guilt, survivor guilt over his brother, and his much more healthy way of looking at it today than then. I also am a real sucker for exactly what I loved about the TV version, which is that I kind of love this motif of all of these childhood friends getting back together to work on some project, even if it is a project involving a lot of forgotten trauma. That's cool. I mean, that's the kind of thing that makes me sit up and lean forward and pay attention, because it's such an interesting concept, and I like seeing it played out on a screen. So I'm kind of most interested when they're just sort of wandering around and getting reacquainted with one another. And I'm completely alone in this. I think there's no one on the planet who says, you know what I love most about the 1990 miniseries It is the Chinese restaurant. But I often feel that way, truly. So that's sort of where I am. So why don't we compare this version to previous, well, either to the book or to the TV miniseries, depending on how well prepared you are to talk about that. And we'll get to Pennywise, but first, just the general presentation. And I want to throw something out before I give you guys, and I'll let you guys take it, because I don't have a lot of opinion, but I did hear one thing the other day. And they said, whatever you might say about that 1990 miniseries, it is very possible that we would not have this movie series if the 1990 miniseries had not existed. And
I completely agree with that.
On that.
Yeah.
That's what made
so talk a little bit about the compare and contrast.
Well, Tim Curry's performance in that is what made Pennywise a horror icon. And he, certainly a meme icon. Like, you still see, that version of Pennywise in a lot of, memes on social media. That's what popularized the story. And these movies follow the structure of the miniseries. They don't follow the structure of the book, because the book goes back and forth between the 50s and the 80s. You know, it's not linear the way these are, you know, where you have like the kid's story and the adult story with maybe a few flashbacks. It's all going back and forth. And so I think anybody choosing to adapt this story going forward is always going to have to look back on that miniseries. And there's some stuff that about that miniseries that holds up. Like, you know, I think these films are superior to, you know, as films to that miniseries, but there's a lot of stuff that still works about it. Certainly Tim Curry is, again, iconic as Pennywise, and you know, there's some parts of that, you know, story that work well in the structures they've laid out about this. There's little doubt in my mind that without that popularizing it, that because that novel is really long and really weird, and I don't necessarily think it would have been the runaway smash hit if it hadn't been adapted into another medium. You know, I mean, it done well as a book, but
Sure.
I think there's a lot of people that will never read 1,000+ page that will sit there and watch like a 3-hour long miniseries.
Right, and this miniseries, for what it's worth, it was prime time. It ran on a major network, I think ABC, I believe, and it ran on a Sunday night and a Monday night, and it was a big deal event, like a big deal. Although, of course, you know, there had been like Salem's Lot. This was a huge event for fans, and kind of Stephen King's triumphal return to television. And 1990, you know, so that's before The Stand, before all that stuff.
I also think that's why they did the time periods the way they did. Whereas like the people who are in my general age group that grew up with that miniseries were nostalgic for it, and so they made the losers that age. And
so that's an interesting thing. But before we talk about detractions, that is a really interesting thing. The timing. I had not thought about that, Drew. That by putting it in the 80s. Go ahead.
I will even take that a step forward. I think my fear of clowns has become so prevalent in our society, is that you had Batman the year before with Jack Nicholson as a scary clown, and then you had It the year after it.
Yeah, but I don't think that the Jack Nicholson Joker is thought of as really a clown. He's just thought of as this weird deformed. But for sure, Tim Curry, and also the Poltergeist stupid clown doll scared the crap out of everybody. Yes,
Julie, I'm gonna tell you, as somebody that was that general age, Jack Nicholson was thought of as a scary clown by people in my age group. Oh yeah. Like we like, it was not uncommon to lump Tim Curry and Jack Nicholson together, and
because I thought of it. This is going to sound silly, but it's like I did not think of Jack Nicholson. I thought of him as the Joker, which is a weird. I know he's the clown prince of crime, but anyway, we shouldn't get. But okay, the whole point, the question is what makes that interesting. I get exactly what you're saying, but getting back to the timing, what I am fascinated by is if you moved these characters just 10 years forward more, the story has to get really different. But by putting them in the 80s, that is the last gasp of the analog world that sort of shriveled up and blew away in the United States anyway, with the advent of the internet, and then smartphones came and everything. But the world that these kids are running around in is still an analog world, where basically whole afternoons can just sort of stretch towards you, and there is no one to talk to. There's nothing electronic to look at. Everything is just physical. So and in that sense, the 80s is very similar to the 50s, and 20 years after that, 2005 is very different from the 50s. So that's a super good point. They could make that change like that, and it makes almost no difference whatsoever. Wow. Certainly, if you've watched the miniseries recently, one thing you guys, of course, will notice is, it fades to black every 15 minutes or so for a commercial break. There's definitely like that sort of TV miniseries feel. One of those things that I really love, though, about Stephen King miniseries is, to me, they're just comfort food. I really love getting into I guess because honestly, they're not that threatening. There's a certain sort of level of fear and not much more. They're just these sort of comforting little plays, and that's where we, I think, can get to the big difference with this one. Drew, as you pointed out, the last book opens with the graphic murder of a kid, right? He gets his arm bitten off and he crawls around and he bleeds to death. That's in a Hollywood that still sort of has that rule that you try to let the kids survive all the time. That is an unusual thing to happen. And it sort of says, hey, you're a little bit less safe. I mean, we know that we're still on rails, right? Because we're adults, we know we're watching a movie, but it does sort of make you sit up and go, oh well, we might have some different experiences here. Before we get to the big crazy thing that opens this one, though, can we compare the different Pennywises? Tony, I mean, do you? Because I haven't called on you in a little bit. When you think about Pennywise, these are two completely different interpretations of the same role. I mean, it blows my mind how different these are.
Yeah, I mean, I think both are good and valid. It's weird to me that so many people feel the need to dunk on one or the other. You can like two things. It's entirely you can like a myriad of things. It's especially as an adult. Like there's a world has a lot of different interpretations. Can you imagine? You don't have to pick a Batman or a
right.
You don't have to pick a Joker. You don't have to pick
James Bond.
Number of things. Yeah, James Bond. Like you can say, hey, I really like this one. I also like aspects of this one. I don't really like that one, but here's why. This world we live in, if one thing has to suck and the other thing has to be the best. This weird hyperbole.
Yeah.
Like sometimes just a bunch of things are okay.
Not
everything is the worst
really
or the best, but I think both are valid. I think Skarsgård playing up both the entertainer aspect of this creature's past that he's adopted, as well as playing up how strange and alien it is very interesting. Whereas Curry kind of plays it more straight. It's still supernatural horror, but it doesn't have the same kind of otherworldly vibe in the same ways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. That he's definitely super scary, but there's something about the way that Bill Skarsgård plays it, not only the special effects, but the actual acting, that just feels so unreal. Like it feels like not a real just bad guy. I have to agree with you on that. But I think Tim Curry was more scary, just as far as
what's weird about Tim Curry is, in his role in this, I was watching him earlier, just clips of a whole bunch of scenes. And he puts his entire body and his entire head and everything into every line. I mean, he really works to bring a performance to every single thing that Pennywise does. And his theory seems to be that Pennywise is he's like a funny demon. He's almost like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of concept, because his shtick, when he doesn't reveal how awful he really is he's a clown, but he's more like a Borscht Belt comedian, telling dumb, early 20th century jokes, and laughing, and he has the squirt flower and just all this incredibly goofy stuff. There's a scene where he's freaking out Harry Anderson, and he's doing it just by telling a bunch of really dumb jokes, like the kind of jokes that people would do on TV, where they call the grocery store and so forth. Just really lame stuff. And Bill Skarsgård would never do any of that stuff.
Well, yeah, but also Skarsgård, I think, takes it. He plays up what. And I think it works. Both work for me. But in his interpretation, he seems to play up the fact you see more of the times where Pennywise is very cognizant that he's an alien weirdo creature.
Yeah.
And seems confused about he's more often than Tim Curry's portrayal confused that he's still on this earth in a way.
Yeah.
Or he realize, like, it's more of a consciousness. Whereas Curry's Pennywise, he's chosen to play it as long as I'm Pennywise, I fit into this world, even if it's a weird demonic supernatural thing. And that's direction. Also, Tim Curry can't move his eyes independently.
Right.
And do all the, which isn't CG, and that's crazy. But just how they chose to portray a creature that's not of this earth or not of our current world, whether it's completely alien, whether it's demonic, is interesting to me.
Go ahead.
I want to talk about. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but I want to talk about specifically in this movie. If you want to get what the Bill Skarsgård, because I feel like what Tim Curry and Bill Skarsgård both have for them, and this is what I've always said about Pennywise. I'm not scared of clowns. I am scared of Pennywise because there's something about putting a clown in a place a clown shouldn't be, like a storm drain or in the example I'm going to use, a underneath a dugout in a baseball stadium.
We got no spoilers here. We got all the spoilers. So go ahead.
That scene to me is the definitive scene of what is, if you wanted to understand what this version of Pennywise is about, that is the want to watch, because
under the bleachers,
so you have this poor little girl with a birthmark on her face who follows a firefly under the bleachers, and Pennywise catches it and he leans in and he's like oh hello, and he's got his Winnie the Pooh voice, and she immediately has the gut reaction that we all would have if you ran into a fucking circus clown under the bleachers in the middle of the night, which is, you shouldn't be here.
You're not my friend.
Leaving. Yeah. And so she starts to leave. And the way he manipulates her, he brings up the fact that everybody makes fun of him because he's weird looking, which of course she has this birthmark on her face, and that stops. He plays on her sympathies. And then he says, oh, I could blow that birthmark right off of you. You just have to count to 3. Yeah. And then it's 1, 2, and then he doesn't even wait for 3. He bites her head off.
No, she goes, you're supposed to say, and then when she says 3, he bites her head off.
There's a cruel, her head off. There's a cruel payoff there. Right. And that, okay, so all of that just indicates so many things about
psychology. His whole psychology is one of contempt for humanity, that he's observed ways to humiliate and to mock, and so in a way Pennywise is actually a great insult comedian on a cosmic level, but like there's this like level of sadism to him, and like that to me, like it's all in that scene. He is mocking that poor little girl, and to me that is the scariest scene in this whole movie. It
happens again and again. Pennywise appears to be, nobody ever says this because there's very little plot exposition in these movies, weirdly enough. But nobody says this, but Pennywise seems to really be empowered by creating fear and tension and uncertainty and humiliation and all that stuff.
Well, that's why that's his, the idea is that's his MO, is he must, or either things taste better. His whole thing is to instill as much fear and humiliation and rancor into, well, mostly fear, into his victim right before he's going to kill them.
Right.
That's
but
the
also,
whole point is that.
Also, though, I mean, that scene in particular is really just terrifying, because that is how actual predators draw in children.
Oh, absolutely.
They say they play, and not just children, but women as well. They play on the natural instinct of caring and wanting to nurture and wanting to connect. And so they're like, hey, please help me find my dog, or hey, I'm really sad about this thing. Can you help me? Whatever. And it's the same with, like I say, the type of women too, where the person, and I'm maybe men as well, but I think less so.
Well, with men, it's often in the guise of you become a con artist. But yeah, you're right. This is where the movie becomes a metaphor. I'm actually thinking of like people who will reach out to anybody and just say, hey, if you're a compassionate person, you'll connect with me right now because I need that, and therefore you're going to connect. And that's why they pulled them in. So that was just, oh God, that scene.
I hated that scene. I wish it wasn't in the movie, except that I know that this is why he has to be a bad guy, is that he hurts children. But same with the little Georgie in the boat. It's like you just, oh God, you hate to see a child not only be murdered brutally, but also be conned that way. You know what I mean? Like just the
Yes.
whole thing. It's like, oh,
Well,
awful.
and remember this scene is also in the miniseries, but it's very different. In the miniseries, they treat us with a great deal of they treat us with kid gloves, basically.
Well, it's on TV, so it can be
on TV.
Yeah.
The kid
vastly
spots
different.
him amongst the drying sheets, and then we cut away, and she's been eaten, but we don't actually see.
Yeah.
And you said it exactly right, Tony. It's because they wouldn't do it on
But
TV.
Well,
but you know what though? I actually way prefer. This is just me because as I've said many times on this podcast,
Hey, say
I
it,
don't like
own it. It's all right.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
like gory movies. So to me, having a spooky scene like that where you just have apparitions, like the whole, Jason and Michael Myers thing where they'll suddenly appear and then they'll disappear and you're just like, behind sheets, behind a tree, in a mirror, whatever. That is way more effective for me and spooky and scary. And they don't have much of that at all in this movie. There's really not a lot of spookiness. It's all just kind of in your face, monsters, gore, terror,
Well, I mean, that's what
I,
gets butts in seats lately. I mean,
Yeah.
I
if
don't
we
know
go back
if I
to
fully agree
the
with, I don't know if I fully agree with that.
What was spooky to you?
The whole this scene up until the point, and I actually don't think this is a very gory movie, but that your mileage may vary. But this whole scene actually that we're talking about right up to the point where it does get more violent. The whole conversation with the old lady in Bev's old apartment.
Yeah, that was just creepy. Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
The scene with Bill talking to the apparition of Georgie in the storm drain, like there's a lot of creepiness in this movie.
So
maybe not
before we
Tony,
what was it you were gonna
I'm going to go with
sorry,
Julia though too, because this is coming from somebody who likes gory movies as well, but I still go back to The Haunting. The original Haunting is one of the scariest movies I think you can watch, and there's zero gore and only a few strange practical effects, the door bulging and a few other things. And that movie is insanely scary.
Or like the whole Twilight Zone.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't think that would be the right way to do this per se.
No, of course not. I don't think it would be,
because we kind of already had that with the TV miniseries. Right. I think like going into this, you had to do this a little bit more in your face.
Oh, by the way, Drew, I can totally attest to this clown thing, and Jason can as well. I can't remember if we told it on this before, but we tried to win Button-Mathon tickets by going to an all-night horror movie marathon, and sitting close to us was this guy in full clown regalia with this horrible rubber mask.
Yeah.
And he had a seat from like a boat, and he stuck that in the ground. He sat there and drank his Heineken mini keg.
So weird.
And all of it was just, if there was something about that person, I don't know who they were, but Jason and I both were in talking, especially afterwards, go, akin to, do you think that guy has bodies in his cellar or buried somewhere? Because it really feels like, and this is after going through a state hospital that was supposedly haunted. It probably wasn't, but all of the things leading up were, close to a cemetery. We're watching movies all night. And yet that guy in his clown costume with his boat seat drinking beer was scarier than most of the things I saw that night on screen. And I don't know what it was, but all of it was off-putting.
No, real life stuff, like you're saying about the how clowns being where they shouldn't be is super scary. That real life stuff is so much scarier than anything fictional. When we went to see it, the first one, they had at the Alamo. I remember telling you guys about this, that there was this kid in a yellow raincoat with a balloon, just standing there. It says, saying, I think she was. Or she or he, I can't remember if it was she or he, was saying, we all float, or something, whatever it was, but just repeating the same thing over and over. Holy crap. Like, I'm still scared thinking about that. Like, it just freaks me the hell out because it was just so weird.
I want to bring up something odd and that strikes me about this. It's true. You see a clown if you're riding to work and you look into the trees, the little woods that separate a couple of neighborhoods, and you see a clown standing there just inside the trees. that's very scary because a clown's not
Yeah,
supposed
there was
to
an
be there.
Austin clown that was terrorizing, wasn't there? Or was it Austin or Dallas?
Well,
There
it
a
was
clown
all
that
over.
was
The
terrorizing.
clowns were everywhere, and they seem to have gotten bored
Yeah.
with this now. But the funny thing is, if something gets too weird, we don't actually see it at all. Like typically, and that's just the way that the mind works and the way that attention works. So they test that over and over again. People can be paying
So-
attention to a basketball game, they don't notice a gorilla walks across the basketball. But
Yeah.
so there's just so much weirdness that we can then notice and go, well, that's very strange. Go ahead, Tony.
Do you think that the clowns got bored with it, or do we have to just wait another 27 years for another clown outbreak?
It wouldn't be 27. It'd be like 22 now or something.
The funny thing is, people should go back and listen to our first discussion from 2017 because I think I went on at length at the time because I've always been so bored with the whole scary clown concept because I never cared one way or another about clowns, and but I've always thought that Pennywise is a perfectly scary clown, and that's
the episode in which
No.
we learn Jason is bored with scary clowns because he actually dresses up as a scary clown and hides in the woods.
No.
I'm so bored with this.
No, I think he would change his tune if a scary clown suddenly appeared in his window, though. I'll tell you what.
Well, sure I would. I mean,
you can
so
Hey,
would we
Juliet.
all.
Secretly,
I'm way ahead
in
of you, Tony.
secret.
I'm way ahead of
I think you can easily test this.
I'm
I
way ahead
think
of
you probably have 2 daughters who can
I thought you were
help you test this.
Oh, and you guys saw that I posted the picture of Sophia from 2 years ago that she dressed up as. Just all she has to do is reprise that whole costume.
I always said
Give it a few months. Now that
when I was a teenager,
Yeah.
I always said that there were 3 things that I was afraid of, which was it was faces in windows. What is it? What was it? It was faces in windows and big men with machetes. But here's what's weird: is I can't remember the third one.
Oh,
What was
you and Rick Perry.
What was the third thing that I was afraid of? That's very weird. Well, I have a feeling it's going to come back to me. Wow, now that's actually a neat plot. A guy knows that there are 3 things he's afraid of, but he's forgotten what the third thing is.
Ooh, that's a great setup for at the very least a short story.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
It's
Oh,
butterflies.
So meanwhile, back in Derry, Maine.
Back in Derry, Maine, what I was thinking about was how this Stephen King's work, and I think maybe all horror works really well when you can both talk about the thing as being about what it's about, like an alien clown that manipulates people by making them afraid, and also as a metaphor for real life stuff, like Joy, like you said, like people who are con artists and people who are child molesters, or people who are what we call emotional vampires, which is a person who, there's a weird difference there. There's like a funhouse mirror effect between a person who is a friend who needs your support, and you lean on one another as the years go by, and someone is one, someone is more than the other, and somebody who is just a vampire, and they take, and they just never give back, and you can never quite tell what one's going to be until you're able to look back and go, what a successful relationship that was. And this one is one of those psychic vampires. He just takes and takes and takes. Gosh, okay, so those are the differences between the Pennywises. We should also talk about the comparing kids and adults, several ways of going after that, but I first wanted to point out, I think this is a much more talented set of adults, but honestly, not by much. I thought that the adults in the 1990 version were perfectly fine. I don't think that anybody didn't seem real. They all seemed like perfectly adequate actors, but and like Tim Green as
What, you talking about this movie?
no, what I mean is in the 1991, the actor, we have a tendency to, for whatever reason, complain about the actors in the 1990 version because they were all TV actors. It was John Ritter and Harry Anderson,
Right.
and Annette O'Toole and Tim Green, and probably somebody that I'm forgetting.
Who is Tim Green?
He was Venus Flytrap. He was Mike. He was great.
Oh, right, Mike. Yeah,
He was fabulous. I actually like him better than this Mike, but
Yeah.
and his face shows up. very briefly in Isaiah's upstairs apartment at the library. But these are heavier hitters than the John Ritters and Harry Andersons.
Well, it's a really fun cast. I mean, I feel really. This is one of my complaints about this film. I feel, and I know that there's not room because they want to have so many of the the scares in there, all the spooky things. But I wish there was more room to develop the characters, because I feel like the characters don't nearly get developed enough as adults, and the actors are so good. It's just such a shame. Like, I'm just like, Jessica Chastain and James McAvoy. It's like, come on, these are brilliant actors who need to be doing this stuff. Bill Hader gets a lot of great stuff to work with, and a lot. He's just super fun, and I love that Finn Wolfhard actually picked him, and also the girl, I forget the young actress's name, picked Jessica Chastain as well as wanting them to play them as adults. But
really?
But they just they don't get to, like, especially what bothers me a lot about Beverly is that she doesn't ever get to deal with the fact that she has obviously repeated in her marriage the abusive relationship she had with her dad, and yet somehow magically through confronting the clown, she's going to be healthy in her relationships. I mean, I think we could have had a lot more, but again, I know there's not time.
That's because it is their collective trauma. Like he represents. He's not just Bill's survivor guilt. He's the bullying. He's the racism. He's everything that is bad about their past in Derry. And that's why when they left Derry, they don't remember it. And that's actually something, I don't know, that admittedly, I think that, yeah, you're right. They could have probably spent some more time. And apparently there's going to be an even longer supercut of this movie. So maybe it'll have more of that stuff in it. Yeah, they're going to do apparently a 7-hour-long version for Netflix, like the really long version of Hateful Eight that they have.
Listen, I'll watch that. You bet.
Yeah, I will too. I know. I don't doubt that there's not an audience for it. But the I don't know. That's sorry, Tony. You first.
No, well, I think also, Julia, you're missing that. What you're talking about is the stuff that's missing from the book. The fact that Henry Bowers isn't as pervasive, and even when he is doing things, they kind of make a joke. It's way more jokey. Also, having the spouses come into especially her abusive spouse, come into play more, kind of develops that. And instead they kind of chose to go with the kind of, I don't know, it's a little formulaic when everybody has a section and you go, okay, well, here's this person's trauma. Ta-da! Now let's skip to the next person's trauma. Ta-da! Oh, and then you just see that kind of repeated, and those scenes are interesting. But once you kind of get the rhythm of what's going on, it just kind of plays out, as opposed to these outside forces kind of forcing people's hands and moving things on the chessboard. Which has a little bit more development, in my opinion. I just found that missing. Maybe the supercut will kind of.
Well, the other thing too
that'd be interesting.
That I forgot to mention that's missing is that Richie is apparently gay, and we don't ever get to see him go, you know what, that's okay that I'm gay. Why would I be closeted about that with these people? Or whatever. Or yeah, I was in love with Eddie or something. And anything other than just, oh, hey, I'm going to carve R plus E into this tree. And it's like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, okay. Without getting into the gay bashing question. Let's talk about this one. Yeah.
I will. Before I agree with you, I agreed with you with that while I was watching the movie, but I was actually, when I watched, and I'm not going to name this person's name on the podcast because that would be disrespectful giving to what we're talking about. But I watched this movie with a friend of mine who is gay and is not come out to everyone in their life, and they actually said that scene really worked for them.
Which scene?
And the scene of him carving the names. Carving the names for and they were affected emotionally by that. So I think contextually, and obviously there may be gay people that see that and go, no, that's bullshit as well. Like my reaction was, like why would a comedian in 2019 in LA be in the closet? That's not, but
I'm not concerned about why they're in the closet up until that point. The question is, again, if the characters could grow so that he faces whatever is keeping him from being, like, if everybody else is facing their,
I think that's the thing, though. that's the thing. Like him carving the initials is supposed to be that, like, I'm going to live openly now.
That's supposed
That
to
was-
be that, although in a more prosaic movie, you might even have had some lines of dialogue where Beverly goes, "Well, what's going to happen with you now, Richie?" And he goes, "I don't know. It's a whole new world of living as me," or something
Do you
like
need
that. No, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I
I'm
think
not sure.
I don't think so.
I mean,
In
he
my
can't
opinion,
tell
I don't know.
he can't tell Eddie that he was in love with him because Eddie is unfortunately dead at that point.
Oh, I want to
So
talk
it's
about that
exciting.
too in a minute. But first, I want to ask you this, Drew. What did your friend have to say, if anything, about how the gay bashing?
I thought we were going to save the gay bashing for the trauma section.
No, the hate crime. What? No, this is where it fits. It's like the hate crime thing I'm
Okay,
talking about.
we could talk about it now. That's fine.
Yeah, because this is where it fits.
They didn't have they didn't have a problem with it.
With the hate crime being so, because I thought it was
But that's in the
so
that's
like
in the book. That's in the book.
yeah, but a lot of things are in the book that don't get put in.
They didn't have a problem with it. I'm not gonna say, like, I'm not gonna tell, like, the thing is though, like, just because a gay person didn't have a problem with it doesn't mean that, like,
Right.
one, like, that's not a monolith is what I'm trying to say.
No, of
Like,
course
obviously
not.
there's been a lot of opinions and think pieces. Personally, as somebody with a lot of friends and people that are, and in the queer community that are in my life, personally, what I wish that they would have been able to telegraph a little bit more or show a little bit more, which is in the book, is that the hate that is coming off of these people is what actually awakens Pennywise.
Right.
And that's actually part of the story, as opposed to just this awful thing that happens. And I think that would have made it a little bit more important, instead of just some like brutal way to open up a movie that's ultimately about a demon clown. It's something that's really horrible in real world, which I get where you are coming from, Julia. I do.
I don't think that Joy has necessarily drawn a conclusion yet.
I was bothered. No, I really was bothered a lot by the hate crime being so, because it's like the most violent thing in the movie is, okay, let's just show this person really getting the shit beat out of them, and then Pennywise, and I get that it's in the book. I'm not saying, I know it's a Stephen King choice, but then Pennywise is going to go, oh hey, you just got the shit beat out of you, and now I'm going to kill you in front of your lover, and it's like, I felt like that was just too much, especially given that it's like the most violent thing in the whole film is
I'm not saying it's
the attack.
necessarily wrong of you to feel like that. I will say I do not feel like the scene glamorizes the people who like they're ugly, repulsive people who look kind of subhuman, actually. And
so this is more like the question of, should we? This is more like, and I'm not saying that there's an answer, but it's more like a question of, should we show graphic sexual violence or not?
Is it
it's an ongoing debate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I've seen that dozen think pieces about this scene, and I don't think this is an easily answerable question.
No, for sure. But it is our purpose here. Go ahead.
I'm kind of my usual opinion on this is that everybody is going through their own stuff, and especially as a straight white dude, it's not my place to tell someone, hey, don't be traumatized from that. It's just a horror movie.
Right.
That's total bullshit. I mean, I have, as growing up in a tiny small town, I often had people say, calling me, gay slurs just for being smart, just for having like a different haircut, just for being different.
Yeah.
And at the time, it's crazy now to think about, but I think those words still have a lot of hurt in them.
Sure.
But it's weird to me, like, objectively as an adult, I'm like, why should I even, like, that wasn't me, and these people are terrible people, and why should you be ashamed to be gay, and so it's weird, but that was a thing, that was a humiliating, hurtful thing for people to say. I mean, I've even, when I was told it before, when I was going in Savannah and had 4 huge fucking army dudes jump me, threaten sexual violence, and threaten to kick the shit out of me. Like that, seeing that scene in this movie triggered things for me that weren't, even though I'm not gay, and then going through that. So I can't tell people to not be traumatized. That's insane. Because I see people going like, oh, it's a horror movie, what do you expect? I will say, however, that Pennywise himself, we live in a weird meme culture where there's drawings of like Pennywise hanging out with Babadook and they're friends, and that's supposedly wholesome and all this weird. It's like, no, Pennywise is the embodiment of evil. If he's there to twist a relationship. So if you had a previous relationship, he's there to twist that. Like the dad scenes or the husband and wife scenes, or
the way he homophobically or uses homophobia as a bludgeon at the Richie character.
Exactly. Yes. So you're not supposed, like, it's weird to me that people would go, oh, I can't believe that Pennywise did this. With that part is the part that I'm like, what did you think he was? Now,
he eats little children.
But it's not about thinking that Pennywise shouldn't have done it. It's about thinking that the movie or the book shouldn't then add insult to injury. And I get that is why he's so evil. But
so we're back to the kid. Yeah. We're back to the, do you cut away from the kid or do you show it?
I don't know. I get where you're coming from, Julia, but I also have seen a lot of like parts of these think pieces where people seem somehow betrayed that Pennywise does these things. It's like he's a child-eating monster.
No, I'm not. But
I don't part of it
is not even a human being.
Yeah, but part of it is this whole social media meme. This is wholesome, and I picture this, and this is my headcanon, and this is how. Like, sometimes monsters are just monsters, and that's kind of the point of a horror movie. That's really it. But the trauma part, I feel, again, when I say that, if that part is what makes someone feel better or someone come to grips with something, or if that's how you deal with things, it is not up to me to tell you that those feelings aren't valid. Sure. And I know people who do that, and it just sets me off because everybody's got their own journey and you can't know. And also a lot of people assume like, oh, you're so easily offended, blah, blah, blah. You don't know what that person has been through. Like that's a terrible freaking assumption. So
and people always say that about other people who are offended by different things. But everybody's offended. Everybody's easily offended by the thing that offends them. You know?
Sure. But that's also Pennywise's thing. That is kind of his whole MO.
Can I wrap this towards something that every time I watch a movie with a car, as people who listen to this podcast a lot, I was in a car accident that killed my twin brother. Any time there is a car accident in a film, and if it's significantly loud or jarring enough, I will freak the fuck out.
Sure.
Happened while I was watching this movie.
What happens? There was you're in the theater. What happens then, Drew? Like what?
I have to look away from the screen. I have to sometimes hold my ears. I have to hold my face. Sometimes I have to even get up and leave the theater for a second. And I can put myself back together because I've been dealing with this trauma long enough. But my point that I'm making is nobody can tell me to not feel this way. So if somebody is watching this movie and that opening sequence makes them uncomfortable, that's them. Like nobody can tell anyone not to feel that
kind of their
burden. But here's the thing is that people feel uncomfortable when other people feel uncomfortable. And so when people say that, it's because they would like everybody to feel happy. So they want to be able to
do that.
No, I know, but that is what it is. People, everybody goes through life going, I wish everybody would be cool with everything all the time, including whatever I'm doing that could be hurtful to them. So like if for example, if you're the kind of person who just likes to make a lot of noise and you're just like, everybody should be cool with that. And if you are bothered by my making noise, that's your problem. Well, maybe you should be considerate of other people when you're in a restaurant or a library or whatever it is. But that's just how people go around. They don't want other people to be uncomfortable, but they also don't want to change their own behavior. So I think that's part of what this is that they're going, the fact that you're uncomfortable makes me uncomfortable. So
can I throw an angle on this though? Well, I know Tony and I have talked about this a lot, and Drew and I a little bit about how we all have things that are triggering, like certain kinds of accidents, certain kinds of crimes, certain kinds of whatever. And I think the best we can do is that you give people, this is why I actually am all for people being allowed to do whatever the hell they want in their art, but I'm all for trigger warnings. All for it. Love it. Because I'm like, hey, anybody is not down with plane crashes, we got one in here. Anybody's not down with child molesting, there's one in here. and
Well, nobody's
that
down
way,
with it. The question is anybody who's triggered by it. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I get it.
But I have a tendency to speak in sort of.
I'm just
I don't
saying,
know.
there's hopefully there's nobody who's down with child molestation.
No,
except
no,
maybe
no.
child
But you know what I'm
molesters.
saying. In
But
other
yes,
words,
I hear you.
and anybody who's triggered by it, yes.
Right.
And that's what function that has. Because you're kind of going to say, we're not going to change our art. We are warning you so that you can do what you need to do, including not watching this movie or not
Yeah.
watching this. But
Well,
you're
or
saying,
you can
Julia,
sit.
yeah, go ahead.
You can sit that part of the movie out and still understand portions of the
Yeah.
thing that I kind of will side with Julie on this is this is a concept works in the book because it's actually part of the story.
Yeah.
This, it just seems like a horrible thing that happens to start, like, it's not implied enough that that this gay bashing.
Well, and
is
again,
what
there's
wakes
no
Pennywise up.
exposition. There's no
Yeah.
line where Mike or somebody goes, listen, I've often theorized that this alien creature or this whatever it gets stronger off of hate crimes. You know, it would be useful for one person.
Them.
On a side note, I will have to say, and then we should probably get back to it, or we could keep talking.
Sure.
But I had a really telling moment recently where I was talking to a good friend of mine, and I was talking about how I tend to listen in on conversations because when I was younger, I had to really like keep my head on a swivel because where I lived in rural Mississippi, it is really possible I could get beat up or like, jumped, and just for being different, liking metal and having quote unquote long hair, any of these things, and how I tend to people watch and listen just because that was how I always grew up, and it felt weird sometimes, and I don't do that. And her response was, "Welcome to being a woman, only that's 24/7 all the time."
Yeah, true.
And I had no response. Like, I understood, and I talking to most of my, if not all of my female friends, and she told me a truly horrific story about growing up, and it made me listen even more, and it stuck with me. Because I have a certain, like, yes, some of that was dangerous, but it never ended up being hyper violent, even though, like I said, in Savannah, it could have easily ended up that way.
Well, and I was telling,
but it was really just like, wow, yeah, I get it,
Yeah, and I was telling Jason because he was talking about, we were talking about a story that he read in some, like, Dear Prudence or whatever it was, something, and he was like, well, I personally think this person was being a little ridiculous or something, and I'm just like, but imagine if a guy did that same thing to you, like, because if you think of it as like, well, I wouldn't bother me
what the situation was.
It was the person getting somebody putting their tongue down their throat, and you're like,
oh yes, yeah.
I'm like, imagine if some big guy came and did that to you, like, how would you feel? You know what I mean? And you're a big guy. It's like, just, you got to stop thinking of it as, what if I did that to somebody else? Well, how should they feel? No, you got to think of it as, what would you feel like if a man that's bigger than you did that to you? Because that is, because men tend to like to think often, am I capable of doing something like that? And if so, how would I expect the other person to handle it? And it's like, you got to stop thinking of it that way, because we're not seeing it from your perspective. We're seeing it from our perspective. So yes, Tony, I appreciate you saying that. That's absolutely right.
In the law, there's a thing called the eggshell skull rule, which I think actually applies to life pretty well, which is that you can think that what you're doing makes the most sense on the planet, but you have to be ready to adjust your response based on just wacky random shit that happens to regular folk. So if you're throwing confetti around, that might be normal, but if a person has an eggshell skull, they might accidentally move out of the way and bump their head on the wall and crack their skull you just have to be ready for the world.
And you're liable for the whole damage. You're not liable for the damage if that person hadn't been like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And anyway, but we haven't really come to much conclusion here, other than you just have to be thinking about it. I don't know if I would have included the scene, but I understand where it's there. And I think if we've come to a conclusion, it's that it really would have been helped with some dialogue that explained it,
And again, I know that a lot of this is that the movie is already super long, so they don't want to include a bunch of extra dialogue about things, but I do think it would have made a big difference. So anyway, okay, so what was the topic that you wanted to jump into?
Yeah,
that'll catch you from jumping into.
Dovetailing out of this, I think this is a perfect opportunity to talk about all these various characters.
Yeah.
trauma. Like, I mean,
can we talk
that's
about
really what
Beverly in the house? I know we got to talk about all of their trauma, but the one that to me is the most thrilling section is Beverly when she goes to her old home. That whole
Yeah, the old
sequence.
lady is freaking scary as
It's,
hell.
it's a
She
wonderful
is so
sequence.
If they
creepy.
gave out Oscars for creepy old ladies, she'd be a shoo-in.
She'd be a shoo-in.
Julia,
No,
do you want to
can I just
explain?
I want to say, can I describe it? So she goes to her dad's place where he should live, and where he used to live, and so she has not talked to him in years. She sees that hit the name what's her last name? Marsh.
Marsh, yeah.
Yeah, Marsh. She sees the last name Marsh on the buzzer. She buzzes it, and then it changes to a different last name that's similar but not the same. And so she's like, and this old lady answers the door, and she's like, "Oh, I thought this was Marsh. I was looking for my dad." And she's like, "Oh, he died. Sorry to be the one to tell you this." And she's like, "Well, we haven't talked in years." She's like, "Well, why don't you come on in?" And she proceeds, and then she's like, "Is the place the way you remember it?" And she's like, "It's cleaner, even though it's really gross." But of course, that's reminiscent of the fact that the last time she saw it was covered in blood and all sorts of horrible things. So anyway, so then the lady is just kind of weird and spooky, but proceeds to become spookier and spookier. Meanwhile, Beverly, while she's going and making cookies or whatever, Beverly, she finds the note behind the floorboard from about the poem, the January Embers poem and all that. Anyway, but then so she comes back out. But the old lady like starts to do these weird things, like just has this really weird smile plastered on her face. What's the line that she says right before she smiles?
I can't remember, but she just freezes.
She just freezes.
And it's really strange.
No one in Derry ever really dies. Not really.
Yes.
Oh God! And
she just freezes.
And then
there's a lot of her in the background.
But there's always her in the background doing the weird Pennywise dance and then being naked and all these like so weird things that are just like, talk about things that aren't supposed the way they're supposed to be. You just don't expect a person to move that way or a person to suddenly be naked. I don't know. And so then, of course, she turns out to be Pennywise, and the whole thing is an illusion. The place doesn't even look how she's seeing it. It is all like just deteriorated and everything. So it's just an interesting scene. And then, of course, Pennywise becomes all monstrous and whatever. But I just found that to be really good. It was really creepy.
It's a wonderful sequence. I wasn't crazy about the CG monster version, but whatever, I'm fine. Like we talked about with special effects around Mechagodzilla, it's fine. I get it, but I was good enough with just the old lady. I don't need the giant monster version, but it's okay.
Well,
maybe
they
else will
kept out the part that they actually left in the TV miniseries, whereas Bev realizes the tea is actually sewer water.
I don't remember this. I don't remember that at all. I believe you. I just literally it's out of my mind. That's interesting.
Overall, this is the better version of the same scene, but like that, I'm not saying it needed that because this is plenty scary on its own, and all the bits with the pictures of the theoretical human Pennywise.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little baffled that so many people on the internet latched on to that was going to be the real backstory of Pennywise, and yet you could get on Google and find out like 5 seconds like the whole backstory of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Not that stuff wasn't effective, and of course you did get to finally see at least a semi-human looking Bill Skarsgård putting on clown makeup, but
So explain to me the deal. Is it that is there ever just a regular born human who gets merged with an alien demon, or is it that the alien demon came down and took on took the form of a human? What is going? Not that I care. It really doesn't matter.
In the book, there is the implication that at some point might have been a real human named Robert Gray that was the real Pennywise the clown, and it started mimicking this clown as a way to get in closer. He could get closer to his preferred prey, which is kids, while dressed as a clown.
I mean, it's a common thing. Besides, look, we read The Shining, right? And we've read all these other Stephen. It's a common motif where evil can take someone over. So, yeah, at the simplest level of understanding, it's easy enough to just go, yeah, there's a guy, and the clown sort of replaces him, either by taking him over or...
Stephen King has never said one way or the other. Like
Okay.
that is not 100% confirmed, and they certainly don't confirm that. They throw it out there, but they don't really do anything with it, and that's the sort
Sure.
of thing where, again, I'm kind of find myself wishing that they had some more time to explore that idea. But although I do agree with you that these little vignettes, this to me might have been one of the better ones. Although going back to the Richie character again,
Yeah.
one of the craziest things in the book is a scene where that Paul Bunyan statue comes to life and attacks.
Yeah.
And the fact that they put that in here and actually kind of made it work in a weird sort of early 90s Tim Burton kind of way, I was really impressed by that.
I'm with
That
you.
is a really good point.
Well, and also, to the business of the park freezing and just staring at Richie, and as Pennywise is talking to him, dude, everybody's just staring at them and they're not moving.
Well, I think that scene really hammers home the idea that Pennywise is kind of the ultimate bully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. He goes after he goes after weakness. Absolutely. All right. So we also wanted to talk about go ahead, please.
If we're going to talk about this stuff, I feel like we have to talk about Bill.
All right, yes.
Because, I mean, his trauma is really what, is driving this movie. #justice for Georgie.
In a way, people think of him as being the protagonist, but look at us. We haven't even mentioned him in the past hour.
It's actually the stuff that affected, look, I already brought it up once in this, and I talked about it a lot in the last time we talked about it. As somebody that lost a sibling and has a lot of survivor's guilt, like, I find myself profoundly affected by all of those scenes, to the point where, like, again, there was a time that, like, to me, the best two scenes about that is you have the scene where he's talking into the storm drain and asking flashbacks to Bill as a little kid, and he's any kid that you wanted, why did you have to take my brother? And Pennywise finally answers back, because you weren't there.
Right. But Pennywise is lying. That's the hilarious thing. Pennywise never gives up.
With him. He's playing with his guilt.
Yeah,
no,
Pennywise never. Go ahead.
It's the cruelty of it, but that's the cruelty of survivor's guilt, is that you start to fill in those blanks yourself. You start to find the rationale. And there's even a point in the movie where we see the adult Bill go and try to rescue a kid and fail. And that's another thing you do when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, is you have to relive the event over and over and over again.
So
he tries to rescue he tries to rescue actual Georgie too.
Yeah,
in the drain.
Yeah, but remember, we already learned this. This is the problem of something that's a sequel, even though it's not really. He already learned this lesson in the last movie. But what did you make of the fact that he seems to come out on the other end, at least for the moment, where he says, no, it's not my fault, and it never was. He
actually has some character growth. Like I said, that's what I'm saying, is that I needed for everybody to have a realization moment like that, and I'm not sure that they all really got them as clearly as that. But I know I liked that. I liked that he had that moment and he figures it out. And I thought the scene. Now, I do think it's really funny that the pitch meetings guy pointed out that he's probably going to get arrested for the murder of the kid in the fun house, because
you want my opinion? I'll bet that kid never even existed. I mean, or not the one in the funhouse, because Pennywise is it's impossible to know. But he's completely unimportant to the plot, really, except for what Drew was just pointing out with reliving.
It's what he
represents.
It's what he represents. The Bill.
But he doesn't have to actually exist in the fair at all, because Pennywise is capable of sending illusions. By the way, the rules don't matter. I mean, it's like, whose line is it anyway? The rules do not matter in the slightest. None of this makes sense. Why don't they give us enough rules at the end? Because truly, they're making this up as they go along. Stephen King has never cared at all in his books about making things that consistent.
The scene that Julia was just talking about, and yes, it does kind of seem like, if you watch the first movie and this one, it does sort of seem like Bill is learning the same lesson, but there's a subtle difference to me. And this, again, which is why the first movie is about grieving and this movie is about trauma. And the scene that Julia was just referencing, the scene where they kind of recreate the flooded basement scene.
Yes.
And you have him, you have actually, you have the puppet Georgie, and there's a scene where Bill realizes that he's the one that's manipulating Georgie, which is what you kind of do when you're a survivor. You start manipulating this idea of the person who you survived. Like they become like this thing almost. And it's horrible, but he actually ends up drowning.
Yeah,
Georgie.
I hated that. I hated that.
It's very sad. It's very sad, but honestly, like he kind of had to do that to get to the point where he turns to his younger self and he says the words you just said. It's not my fault. My brother loved me. I loved him. He knew he knew it, and it was never my fault. And we would not have that without all the stuff leading up to it. This is a movie about killing your past, literally and figuratively. And that's the only way you can really learn to live in the present with trauma. And the problem with Bill, the reason why, even though he went through the grieving process previously, he forgot. He left. He did it. He did it. There's a line by Ben, the character of Ben, but it actually applies to all these characters. The only way you can you can fully defeat trauma is you have to learn to be able to like put the bad stuff aside, but you have to still be able to hold on to the good stuff.
Yeah.
And, Bill hadn't done that. He just forgotten entirely. And to me, first of all, God bless James McAvoy, because like he played this stuff so beautifully for me and, made it so, and I think that's, honestly, the flooded, even though it's not a scene that's in the book, to me, that was like one of the best scenes in the whole movie, where they go back and recreate that flooded basement scene.
Well said. That's really beautifully said. So that's of those two. We talked about Richie. We talked about how he didn't have a wrap up. Bill does. Ben's wrap up is that he gets the girl. There is no trauma that Ben really still needs to overcome. That's what's interesting to me, is that they which is fine. He has a lot of these fears.
He should have been the one to kill Henry Bowers, because like really that was his trauma, was coming from the bullying.
It's really true.
I agree. Yeah.
I also am a little, you're talking about the rules of how it works.
Yeah.
I am a little, I get it a little bit more in the miniseries, and I get it a lot more in the book, where they actually have chapters where it's from its perspective.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Pennywise needs a Renfield.
Right.
Like he doesn't actually need this guy.
Yeah, but I thought, like I was saying in the book, it does a couple of things, like having the more human elements. He doesn't really need this. It's just more chaos.
Yeah, it's another person he's destroying. He's destroyed another
person. And he's sitting after. It's twofold. So he gets to watch. This is how messed up and insane this creature is not only does he get to just traumatize this bully, but he gets to use him as a blunt force trauma emotionally and physically against the protagonist. For him, it's super fun and games. Not even a Renfield. But the thing, humans are so far below him that it's not even a Renfield. It's like a cockroach almost.
It's another weapon.
It traumatizes them so much that it's just bonus.
Yeah.
Bowers is cool. I kind of like his insane, like zany. They did a great job of finding an adult that conceivably looked like that kid grown into an adult. I couldn't tell about that.
But they didn't use him. That's my other thing, is like, just keep going back to it. Even when he's dangerous, they decide to make a punchline out of it.
Yes, he's
not
the comic relief
he is in the book,
in a way. Yeah, he's
the idea
scary.
The idea of going back home, and I've done this, where I went back to Mississippi, and some of it's good, and a lot of it was terrible. Yeah. And having the bully who just messed with you the whole time, it just constantly be on you. That's terrifying. I don't even need a Pennywise.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
nobody needs a Pennywise in their life if you have that. That's freaking awful. So
Yeah.
to have him just kind of just doop-a-doo, oh, he's freed. Oh, look, here's some funny punchlines. Oh, no, he's gone. Like, I didn't
Well-
need to see a sequence of everyone's past trauma that we've already seen in the previous movie when they could have done so much more with the human characters. And that, I think that's my biggest critique.
Interesting.
Right.
So you would have ditched some of these flashbacks in
Yeah,
exchange for
because
some
we've
more.
seen like the hobo we saw.
Yeah.
Like, all of that stuff already happened in the first movie. So you get this whole like, and now on to the next trauma. Here's their therapy.
Yeah. So speaking of which, we should talk about Eddie too, because Eddie has the same experience where he goes into the drugstore to get his medicine, and there's that stupid
all of that, and then also the picking the door thing. All of that.
Oh yeah, there's a hell of a
What
lot
could
of
he
stuff
do?
here.
There's a lot. Like, the fact.
Yeah.
How about her? Like, again, her husband coming, and from that's the thing is Derry collects these things and has this pull as long as Pennywise is there, which goes
How
back
about
to what
the
Drew was saying with
unremarked
the
business that Bill apparently wants to get with Beverly, even though we've already been shown that he has a wife back in Los Angeles, and the movie isn't giving up any opinion really whether that's appropriate or not, because the movie's moving so fast as far as plot exposition goes. That's it is
those
incredible.
parts are the parts that I didn't like.
Yeah.
I try
It's
not.
a waste
I try
of
to
time.
view it. I try to view it as an adaptation. You know, you can't.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfair to go. Well, the book had blah blah blah. But
yeah, well, it's
those
just it's a
things
waste of
are
time
things
because
I actually
obviously
missed.
there are entire movies that are about this particular issue, but there's just not there's
Sure.
no time for it here. They should have just
Yeah.
left it out. She should have just been like, "Oh, you're married, bummer. I guess we're moving on to."
I didn't like the fact that I wish that it either done more of the stuff with Bill's wife or not had her at all, because you only have her in like the one scene.
Exactly.
And frankly, it makes her out to be kind of a shrew, which is kind
Right.
of sexist. And you know, like they could have had that character just been like an actress friend. Like
Right.
she literally added nothing.
All of that stuff, yes. Either do
So
it
that's
or do it more
lame.
like the book.
That's and I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize, Tony.
No, that's my take on it as well.
I just, from a writer perspective, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying it's lame because you should never in a story have people have an extramarital affair. I'm saying that it makes it not a good romantic triangle for this movie, because you know that the movie in the end is going to have Bill going back home because they're not going to have the time for him to deal with all of that. So you know that he's going to lose the triangle and Ben is going to wind up winning the triangle. So which means the whole story is a waste of time. You may as well just had Beverly and Ben flirting with one another and wind up getting together. This is a pretty long movie to begin with.
Right.
So you just don't you don't need it. But yeah.
But like I say, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Eddie though, because Eddie's
you can tell how excited we are about the Eddie story.
No, he's such a tragic character. First of all, he's the one who has the wife and the mother who are both kind of heavy, right?
Yeah, they are the same actress.
Same actress, right? Same actress. So he's got the whole thing where he goes to get his medication, and the monster is holding his mother supposedly. I mean, obviously it's just an illusion, and so he goes and has to deal with that. His mom gets murdered, which I'm assuming is an illusion, not her actually getting murdered there.
It's an illusion. Really She's long dead. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he's got and then he's gonna have to face his own, just complete fear paralysis, where he just doesn't want to help or do anything until he finally is going to help at the end and get killed for it. Now, what I wanted to go, I know we're going to probably talk about the end in a bit, but I just wanted to say, put out there that I don't think he should be dead, because everything else seems to have gotten kind of undone once Pennywise gets defeated, as far as in fact, I'm wondering if anybody should be dead that Pennywise killed, because of the fact that so many things get undone once he's defeated.
That's the problem.
Literally the whole book, the Richard Bachman book. Did you notice that the Derry book was written by Richard Bachman, by the way?
No.
Anyway, so that book actually changes to say that his parents, were just locals who got killed in fire and not crackheads or whatever. So all this all these things that changed. So I'm wondering if Eddie. I think it'd be fun if there was yet another piece to this. If Eddie turned up not to actually have it died, he just got abandoned, and now he had to dig himself out of like some under rubble or whatever. He's like, you guys just left me. But anyway, that's just my little.
Yeah,
I think the people that died are dead. Like because you're talking about hundreds of years of, not even hundreds of years, thousands of years of it feeding on this area.
But I'm talking about this last iteration of the 27 years. I'm just wondering, since I don't know, I just wonder what got undone. Why bother undoing anything? Like, why bother having the book change?
It did not make, I think it's important to say that the librarian Mike, his parents were never crackheads. It was always an electrical fire. It changed the headline. He didn't change actually what happened. At least that's
so he was creating an illusion for Mike.
He was tormenting Mike with that, and because that's goes back to sort of like the racist bullying that this character experienced.
Well, he's pretty darn powerful and busy, isn't he? I mean, he's able to like go. Just imagine what it's like if you're laying there being Pennywise going, oh, the librarian in Derry is opening the book. I got to remember to get that spell going.
He is very powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically like Freddy Krueger, but you don't even have to be asleep. He can manipulate everything around here.
And getting back to the rules really quickly, to get us to the end also. Go ahead.
I want to talk about this scene that we're talking about with the leper, because that's something. Well, first of all, before I go into that, I want to say I hated the fact that they undercutted the grossness of that scene by putting Angel of the Morning over it. I thought that was
I don't know what the hell that was. That made no sense at all.
I think they were trying to be cute. They should have just let that scene play out.
But even if they were to go for a joke, Angel of the Morning, there's nothing inherently that Juice Newton doesn't connect to anything in this story. There's so many. If you were going to go for a joke, Rob Zombie it. Go for something that would have been relevant to these kids.
But
yeah.
I want to talk about what happens in this scene. Is that Eddie finally works up the nerve to fight back to the leper, and what he finds out is the leper is actually incredibly frail and weak because it's a leper. And it goes back to this idea that they start talking about that Pennywise, it has to and this becomes important in the climax of the movie,
which we need to get to.
He has to take on the rules of whatever shape he's inhabiting. This is why when we reviewed the first part, I thought it was a mistake to take out the movie monsters, and this is why I'm coming back to saying that they should have left the movie monsters in, because having him turn into a werewolf and then subsequently be weak to silver was a much more concise way to show this than this meandering thing that they did here, where you had all these people stating dialogue that doesn't sound natural at all.
What?
I just had to get that out. Well, talk about, they keep repeating the line like, oh, he has to inhabit the rules,
conform to the shape, blah blah blah.
And then there's like towards the end, they're like, oh, if we get him to chase us through this small hole, he'll become small. This movie has some really good dialogue, but that bit of dialogue, painful.
Because it's dumb. It's fine. Yeah. I mean, I'm truly, Drew, I'm fine with it. I'm fine. But because everything's a metaphor, we're now at the end of the play. The play is going to be a fight. The fight's going to have tricks. The tricks are going to lead to the demon being defeated. That's how this works. So fine, whatever.
I will say this. Famously, this book ends. The miniseries both end with a big spider.
Yeah.
Which I always feel like. The one thing I feel like they did better. I brought this up when we did our.
They got the big spider here. They do have it.
Okay, so Pennywise is what you've developed antagonism to throughout thing. Smartly, they found a way to keep Pennywise in the final act of this movie, and
Yes.
not just do a big spider. And I think that was 100% an improvement.
For sure.
Yeah, that was
Totally.
Fight me. Nobody's gonna
No,
fight
I
me. Okay.
absolutely agree. He is a big quote unquote spider, and he's actually like he's basically a Pennywise version of the final boss in Half-Life. He's just an enormous like crab-like thing
spider.
that's going dunk 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 with his claws. And they're like, well, wait, he has to he because he's very big, he can't fit into small paces. If he switches around, he can shrink down and chase us. Fine. And I was honestly, this is as good to this is very, very, very similar. That's kind of what you've got here, where they yell at him until he seems very small. It's exactly the same ending that came in. We've seen this before, where a bunch of people realize that the monster can be defeated by yelling at it. Totally.
But I
Lisa
just wish
Simpson
they
did
would have.
this.
I wanted to see him be defeated by believing that he could be, like when she says, this will kill monsters if you believe it will, and so he like tries to kill him with the whatever it was. What was it that he aims
Basically,
at?
they do the same thing twice, and they call it by different names. Because the first time they do it, he throws the spear. They're reciting their stupid and embarrassing ritual thing, and it's gonna work, but then it doesn't. But then all they do is they say exactly the same thing again, which is you can convince him that he's small, and this is really literally the same lesson with different words.
Yeah, but it doesn't work. I don't know why.
It does work the second time.
The second time, which is dumb because it didn't work for. I just hate it.
Because they really truly the way that it's supposed to be.
Because it's a battle of wills, though.
Yeah,
and
they lose their faith, and then
but
they get it back
believed
again.
that it would work when they were doing the chant thing that Mike.
Yeah, but then they started to. They're like Peter walking across the water, and then he starts to shrink into the water, and Jesus says, "Oh, ye of little faith," right? So it starts to work, and then it stops working. That's very, very normal. In fact, you have to do that because the rules of the game in Hollywood today say that your Act 3 attempt has to fail the first time, and you have to like tweak it a little bit and then do it again.
Okay, whatever.
Well, I think it would have been a little boring if like they had just defeated him with the ritual had gone perfect and
absolutely. For sure.
I disagree because I think if you do it right, it's good. Like in Stranger Things, that's how it works. Anyway, I don't know.
No, that's a good point.
How?
When Stranger Things, he shoots. What is the slingshot?
I actually don't even remember.
I
love Stranger Things.
You're talking about season 1. Okay.
No, I'm talking about last season. They had another thing where I think it's Finn Wolfhard's character shoots or something. No, maybe I don't remember because we're not talking about Stranger Things. I just know that there's a slingshot moment in that Stranger Things as well.
Anyway, so instead they
by
yelled
the way,
at me.
owes huge swaths to this particular novel and its previous TV incarnation.
Absolutely.
Totally right. And what's funny is you can see all the different like strands of DNA, because Stephen King, when he wrote in Dance Macabre, he was thinking about this stuff a lot. He was talking about these old like jalopy movies like Giant Gila Monster and stuff, and how there's always a gang and so forth. So it was on his mind a lot, and he kind of perfected it in it. I think he does a really good bunch of characters. All right, we should get our final thoughts. I know we didn't talk about the embarrassing ritual of Chud, but honestly, seriously, the less said the better. I don't have anything.
I know there wasn't a space turtle, and a lot of people are upset about that.
For real. There's also
I've actually seen people upset about the lack of turtle in these movies.
I mean,
there's not the giant turtle. I don't know how the hell you do it though.
That's always one of those like, hey, that's interesting, and of course, like as a Discworld fan, I'm also down with that. But I don't know where a giant turtle fits into this adaptation.
You would have to cut away.
This is something that's going to get adapted again, and I think eventually somebody will do the turtle. So, but This is a story that we're going to probably see revisited a lot throughout.
You know how
the
you would
years.
do the turtle, honestly? You would have a cutaway to the turtle addressing the camera and talking. You know,
Oh my God.
and he would go, about this time I'm beginning to wonder how things are going to go for our friends. You know, it would be like this, because he's God, right? It's so absurd that the only way to do it would be to be profoundly absurd. And so yeah, you cut to George Burns in a turtle suit
Well,
explaining.
George Burns died a long time ago, but yes.
Oh, well then it would be scary.
Yeah. Welcome to the land of deep fake. George
There you
Burns.
go.
There is other shit that you could never put into this movie, and even Stephen King has had a hard time explaining the weird sex scene. Yes, what are you gonna do? So
that part
He
had to
actually
be
no,
insane.
he's explained it. He said that he was on a lot of drugs. What I don't understand,
Okay.
understand is why his that's what editors are for.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I've had editors change all kinds of stuff in my books, and the way it goes is they argue for something and you argue back. And if you really, really seriously mean it, they let you keep something that they really think should be gone.
I still wonder. I gotta be with Drew. Like, as an editor, like if you had an editor, we've had good
Yeah.
editors, we've had not so great editors, but every editor would go, "Wait, that's what makes them close."
Right.
I think there's a better way.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think there's
it's
a better way I don't even know, man.
but the thing is, this is 86, right? So I don't know about the 80s. In the 70s, you had a lot of really grungy fantasy and sci-fi that people like in what we'd call urban fantasy and horror,
Sure.
where that stuff take place in the suburbs and the cities, and it could be truly grungy and have a lot of crazy sexual crap that was way beyond appropriate.
We've
but
seen all of that we've seen all kinds of insanity at Weird Wednesday.
yeah, for sure.
But one thing I didn't see, thank goodness, is that scene.
Yes. Yeah. Stephen King does have a good point where he says, listen, this is totally inappropriate. However, I've also got kids being torn apart and bleeding out, and
Yeah.
it is strange to me that you people are more offended by that.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't know.
Definitely,
I would
yes,
I would have
but
cut the scene.
also,
Whatever. I would have cut the scene for sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, the
luckily,
reason
we
is
don't know
the reason
either.
is because the idea of the children being mutilated is what makes Pennywise a monster. But from my understanding, not having read the book, there's nothing Pennywise monster about them having sex. They've just
No,
made
it's
this choice.
to bring back
So
their
it's kind of
memory and bring them closer together.
Right. So the movie or the book rather seems to think it's a perfectly fine choice.
Yeah, I know. Ugh, exactly. You just want to like, ugh. Yeah. So anyway, that's a thing. Did I call switching over? Did I call Mike's actor Tim Green because it's Tim Reed? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you did, because I was thinking, well, I know Seth Green, but I don't know any Tim Green. But I don't know.
I'm so sorry, Seth Green.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know where you got it. Anyway, at least it's corrected.
Yes. So there we go.
You can also deep fake that back into
Tim Reed.
Anyway,
yeah. So, all right, well, we should get our final thoughts on It Chapter 2, and we'll go the same order. It was Julia. Was it Julia Tony Drew or Julia Drew Tony? I'm trying to remember.
That doesn't matter. We start with Julia, and we'll go from there.
Okay, Julia. Final thoughts It Chapter 2.
I'm trying to think. I feel like there's a lot we still didn't get to because it's such a complicated plot and there's so many characters and there's so much going on. But I can't actually think at this very moment. I feel like we didn't really give Mike a whole lot of, like, we didn't talk a lot about the ritual and whatever and all the stupid stuff about how the origin of Pennywise and of the origin of it and how it comes from, like, what is it, hundreds of thousands of years ago, whatever. I don't know. There's so many things, and I just feel like it's as cluttered in the movie as it is in the conversation, of trying to get everything just kind of crammed in there. But so like I said, there's some good moments, there's some interesting choices, there's some creepy stuff. But gosh, there's some problems too, and like that's just what it is to, like I say, try to cram a huge book into a 3-hour movie. But for sure, I'm glad it exists in the world and that we've all gotten to to take it in.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Drew, final thoughts.
I actually think, having talked out the stuff that I don't like about this movie, I've come around to really appreciate it. Did like about it all the more. Again, I don't think it works quite as well as the first part, but I do think it is very enjoyable. And again, for me, like, revisiting the storyline and revisiting it, and I've said this throughout all the different times we've talked about this. I just find something very cathartic about this story. So I get something more out of it than when I am just watching like a scary movie, because like, yes, it's a scary clown movie, whatever. That's not really the stuff ultimately that I latch onto. I latch onto the idea of grieving and trauma and survivor's guilt, and can you come home? Can you reestablish from family? Can friends be family? And all this stuff that are questions that I have had in my own life. This story, for whatever reason, has a very profound effect on me, and I think that's why I keep going back to it ever since I first experienced the miniseries all those years ago. And I have no doubt that if there are subsequent more adaptations, I'll probably get stuff out of that as well.
Well, and I want to say to your point, Drew, because I think you're making a really good point, that I think part of what is interesting about this story is this idea that, when people experience trauma, you have, your child self or your young self has a tendency to block it all out and go, okay, I'm just going to hide this in the corner of my brain somewhere and not deal with it. And then as you get older, you're like, I think this trauma has had some effects on me and has made my life turn out a different way than maybe it could. And so I should go ahead and now dig this stuff out, face it, deal with it, and hopefully be better for it. And I think you're right, that is kind of what's going on here, is that they've literally forgotten because they've gotten away from it and they've stuffed it into a part of their memory that they don't ever want to access. But then when they do, it's presumably gonna, except for and we never even mentioned poor Stanley, who, well, I think he did at the beginning, but like that he kills himself before he even shows that, before they even get together. The idea that he couldn't do it, and Eddie doesn't survive it, but the rest of them hopefully will be better for having confronted all this stuff.
Yes.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that's what I take from this. That's what I take from this movie. And, warts and all, because it's not a perfect movie, but it's still a pretty damn good one. And it's something I'm going to probably enjoy rewatching. And I am interested in seeing what the supercut looks like. Maybe we can come back and touch on some of the stuff Julia was just talking about. If another revisiting of this subject is warranted. But I find something very profound in this storyline, and so I got something out of even now, just talking about all of this with all of y'all, and so that's I don't know if that's a precise final thought, but that's where I'm at.
I think it's a wonderful final thought, and I think it's a good reflection on the whole series. Tony, what about you?
I like a lot of the movie. I think there's a lot to enjoy. I still miss stuff from the book, like I talked about. I think that it leaned a little bit hard on the humor. It's got a pretty good kind of pressure valve thing, but I don't know. It leaned in a little bit harder than I thought. I think the casting was spectacular, though, and a lot of the effects were cool. It doesn't work for me as well as I think the first one did. And I had a few friends who absolutely just hated this. And they hadn't read the book, so they're going purely off of, this is what I think is a good movie. This is what I think of. I don't have any preconceived notions. So I enjoyed it. I wish I had enjoyed it more, I guess. But it's still pretty solid, and I would look forward to, like Drew said, to seeing the supercut.
Well said. Yeah, for my part, I really love this story because I love the concept of the close group of friends and how their lives change and having to gather back together to deal with a trauma. I think that makes a wonderful fantasy story, and I think it's a wonderful stand-in for a lot of great real stuff. So, this is just the kind of thing that really appeals to me. Uh, I still love the time periods that are reflected in the original version more. I called it the 50s earlier, but it's actually, I guess, the early 60s. But I kind of enjoyed seeing that a great deal more. But the 80s is so much like the 60s, and it doesn't even matter in a small town like this. So it's all the same. I will definitely watch this. When there's a longer version, it. I'm absolutely going to watch that. And I think we should have a supplemental episode where we just talk about other stuff that we learned, just a little half-hour episode about that. I think that sounds like a wonderful idea. So that brings us to the end so far of our discussion of It, the cinematic experience. That it's been 2 years coming, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to talk about it. I can't wait to hear what people have to ask us about it. But before we go, we should do our endorsements. I'm dying to know what people are into. Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I don't know if I have anything that's not truly embarrassing. So, Julia, do you have anything to endorse for us this week?
Well, Jason told me that I have to endorse John Wick because I obsessively watched all 3 John Wick movies and talked about them a whole lot. So he's like, I think that's your endorsement. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess it has to be, doesn't it?
Yes.
I never had seen any of the John Wick
Explain
movies.
what was special about John Wick that really surprised you.
What I loved about John Wick, there's 2 things. One is I loved just all of the stupid ass inside jokes about the Matrix, because you've got Morpheus and Neo, so there's so much. Literally, he says, he's like, what do you need? Guns, lots of guns. Like this whole, there's just so many nods to the Matrix. So I love the Matrix so much, that kind of made me happy. And then also just visually, the sets and I don't even know if they're sets or if it's just what it is, computer graphics, something, but all of the places that they are gorgeous. I just kept going, that's beautiful. That's super cool looking. Oh my God, where is that? I want to go there, because there's all these amazing houses and amazing museums and amazing hotels. So that just visually, I really enjoyed it. And then it was just super stupid. It's all the stuff that you would totally expect, a Keanu Reeves, just badass. He's really just Neo, if Neo is just a very violent human, because he's just mythologically oh, John Wick, you've pissed off the wrong person with John Wick, because he once killed 7 people with a pencil and blah, blah, blah. He's just this amazing legend. And it's hilarious. You can't go in expecting it to be some big, deep movie with meaning. But if you want to see a guy kill a whole crap load of people because they killed his puppy dog, this is the movie for you.
I have rarely seen one line work so well. I'm pretty sure it was Fantastic Fest. The line where he goes, "Oh, it's John Wick." He's just, "Oh," and they just let it sit.
Right. I literally told Jason about it afterwards. I go,
so well.
Why did you hit? Why did John? He said, this guy says to John Leguizamo, "Why did you hit my son?" And it's this major gangster. He's talking. John Leguizamo's because he stole John Wick's car and he killed his dog. And he's like, "Oh."
Yeah. They just let it hang for just enough time. And
he's that would be
played so well in the theater. I was oh man,
that's really wonderful.
Yeah, that hotel is so good too. The world of the hotel, of the Assassin Hotel, is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The world is cool.
Yeah, this hotel where everybody, all the assassins can go, and they're not allowed to kill each other on the premises.
Yeah.
Holy ground, Islander. Yeah.
Such dumb, but literally I watched, because I wanted to watch the third one, because it was just, I just had it. And then I was like, you know what? I haven't seen the first 2. I'll just watch the first 2 as well. So that was my binge watch this week.
Fantastic. Drew, what about you? Do you have anything to endorse?
Well, first off, I want to. I've been sick this week, so I've been spending a lot of time in front of the television. One of the things, a movie that I revisited completely for the hell of it was a movie called Abominable from 2006. Not to be confused with the animated movie that came out this year. It is a low budget. It's best described as Rear Window, but with a Bigfoot. And so it's a low budget monster movie. It's got Jeffrey Combs and Lance Henriksen and Dee Wallace in it. So it's got a pretty good horror movie cast. The creature effects are a lot of fun. The plot is a rock climber who is paralyzed from the waist down, has to come home from the hospital for the first time, and he's got a live-in nurse who's kind of an asshole, but he keeps seeing a Bigfoot out in the backyard murdering people, and no one will believe him, and wackiness ensues. It's a lot of fun. I'm not going to say that it's a great movie, but it is a lot of fun to watch, and the creature effects for low budget are actually pretty impressive. Tying into the whole Stephen King thing, a while back, my wife Jamie gave me a really beautiful first edition of Salem's Lot, which is actually my favorite Stephen King book, and I'm slowly reading it now. I've been again, because I was sick, I had a lot of time to read. Really good book. If all you've ever seen are the two movie versions, which both have the 70s one's the best, but both have their good points and their bad points. But if you've never read the book, you really should. Great book. Finally, so Jamie, again, I'm talking up Jamie again, was interviewed by a online podcast about her career in music, with her, the various bands that she's been in, and also her activism and everything within the Austin community, and also how she came to be the inspiration for a character in my comic book, all through this interview on at a podcast called Backstage Chats. And the website is I will link this up on our Facebook, because the web address is very long. I will just repost this, but I think this is Jamie has been interviewed a lot over the years. I think this is one of the best interviews anybody has ever done with her. I think, they capture how charming and funny and honest my wife is, and the interview, they just did a great job with it. And I just, at the risk of sounding like I'm just like fawning all over my wife, I really, really did love this interview. And you can look it up. It's Backstage Chats with Women. I'm sure with women in music, I'm sure you could find that if you Google it, but I am gonna post a link on the Facebook page. So actually, I think I already have. Yes, I did. Yeah, you could check it out on the Facebook, on our Castle of Horror Facebook page.
Fantastic. Yes, yeah, you did post it. That's wonderful. Mr. Tony, what about you?
First of all, I'm really sad that it's not the Bigfoot in the wheelchair in this in this Rear Window scenario. It's like he's an invalid Bigfoot. He's dealing with humans. His only interaction is see, the missed opportunities. Anyway, because that's what I pictured first in my head. Like, let's throw it on its ear. But let's see. I've been playing Borderlands 3, which is always fun and cool, and the writing's done really, really well. That's what drew me to it more than just a first-person shooter. It's FPS with really cool writing and like sniper rifles that can set people on fire. So also I will recommend something I was going back to, because it fits in with horror and manga. They've been releasing these really nice leather bound or pseudo leather, faux leather kind of hardcovers of Sword of Berserk, which has as much horror as it does fantasy. Especially as it moves along, and it's fascinating. But these nice omnibus black, like leather bound esque hardcovers are amazing. Also, I will be at Fantastic Fest starting on Thursday, and hope to cover a bunch of stuff. You may see interviews in the near future. I'll probably be posting things. It may be after Fantastic Fest before I post a lot of things, but you may see updates throughout when I can get home. This is my annual staycation. I end up seeing about 40 movies during the course of the week. And again, covering for the podcast, I'm going to try to get some more interviews and kind of give everyone, things to look out for. I mean, some of these movies may be months, if not longer. Before, I mean, we still haven't seen the official. I think Shudder's getting it soon, but like One Cut of the Dead, which when it comes out, you absolutely must see One Cut of the Dead. You have to don't read anything about One Cut of the Dead at all. Don't stick it out. You'll get through the first like 20-30 minutes and go, what are you talking about? And then when it hits, and this is universal, when it hits, it hits. So that's the kinds of things that come out of Fantastic Fest. And there's some cool stuff. There's a Stephen King adaptation there. I'm going to try to cover that. But so I won't be on the podcast for the next week or two, depending. I'm going to try to be back on the 29th, I think it is. But we'll see. But expect me to be covering stuff. Expect to hear more later. And, double thanks to Fantastic Fest for being my movie staycation. I could use a bit of cinema therapy, and hopefully I'll be covering more stuff for the, as a person doing press stuff, whereas before I was mostly, over the past 3 years, I've done press. Vaughn's PR does a fantastic job of hooking up the press people and getting the word out for all these fantastic movies that may not be on everybody's radar. So expect to hear more about that. And I'm super stoked because it's been a crazy couple of weeks, and I just really want to just I'm looking forward to living in the theater for about a week. Unfortunately, my wife is a cinema widow during this time. So
I have to add one real quick too from my theater thing is I went to see J-Lo in Hustlers. And boy, she's sexy.
I want to see that movie.
She is so sexy in this movie. Oh my God. She's like super hot. So that's, if you want to see J-Lo being even sexier than usual, go see Hustlers.
I've heard really great things. Everybody I know, and it's on a couple of people's, like some people who normally do kind of genre film. It's been on their radars. Like, this is the movie I want to see, even more than name a bunch of horror movies. So I'm super stoked. I think
we're coming again into a period of the next like 6 weeks or so where it'll be really useful to have the A-list or the Alamo equivalent, because there's a lot of movies.
A lot of good movies, coming up. Yeah, we've got our Downton Abbey tickets. Woohoo!
Yeah, that's right. Salem's Lot, it's funny, Drew, you mentioned that. I love that movie so much, and we actually did. That was one of our earliest episodes, and it makes me wonder. First of all, we've talked about maybe doing an episode about the Rob Lowe version, but it also makes me wonder if some of those early episodes, before we had our modern audio editing and all that stuff, the technological grandeur that people are experiencing right now, it makes me wonder if maybe we should reapproach some of them. Maybe not all of them, but some of those things, like maybe we should try it. We should come at it again, or should we first hit up things that we've never gotten to? I really don't know what the answer is, but if the listeners listening to the show are still listening to the show, this is a long episode, and you'd like to hear like us to like do some of those early ones that don't sound as good again, I'm curious. I'm just curious if people are interested in that. I'm talking about like the Count Yorgas of the world and Salem's Lot and all that stuff, because it doesn't seem so long ago, but it was long ago that it was before we started recording with the equipment that we have now.
I would personally lean towards more of like a year-end wrap-up and keep moving forward. That's my personal take, but hey, I think you're on it though. Tell us, I guess, is what
I agree with Tony. I agree with Tony. I feel like there's so much out there that we have not done.
Yeah.
Like I weep for a lot of, like, just from the 1930s and 40s alone, there are so many movies that I would like us to do.
True. No, good point. Good point.
Also, I'm saying this, I have not seen this movie. I was a big fan of Wormwood with a Y, the Australian zombie movie. That crew has put together a movie called Necotronic with a K.
Hmm.
And it's got Monica Bellucci in it, which automatically gets I have to watch this movie.
Yes.
So maybe we'll cover it, maybe we won't. I'm going to just throw it out there. Your mileage may vary. I have no idea. I know I like their previous work. So, and Monica Bellucci's no slouch. So I'm kind of, I'm really intrigued, and it's making the rounds as far as, festivals go. So, or it has, and now it's on Amazon. So Necotronic, let's check it out at some point, I guess, would be where I'm going with that.
Fantastic. My one endorsement that I would leave with is just one that I always endorse around Halloween time, which is go listen to some CBS Radio Mystery Theater. It's a good thing to listen to on your way to work. They're free. They're all over the internet. You can listen to them on YouTube. They're obviously at archive.org. There's thousands of episodes to choose from. So, who knows what are the best, but yeah, you can't go wrong. It's really just a wonderful way to pass the time. CBS Radio Mystery Theater, they were these daily horror radio shows back in the late 70s and into the early 80s. So anyway, that's it, chapter 2. So let us know what you think. You're the listener. We totally want to hear from you. We want to, if you want to ask us why we left certain things out, why we didn't discuss Mike nearly enough. I don't have a good excuse, but you might want to bring up, hey, I wanted to hear more about Mike, or I wanted to hear about the Easter egg reference to John Carpenter's The Thing that we didn't even get to mentioning
Or the
in this
Stephen
whole
King cameo,
shit.
or the Stephen King
Stephen
cameo.
King cameo, the bicycle.
I mean,
I don't know, all those things. There's so much
many
more.
things.
So feel free to just come on and go, I can't believe you guys didn't mention this, or I want to talk more about this. Fine, we'll totally engage with you. Everybody, have a wonderful, wonderful week. Be excellent to each other. Remember that the things we argue about online are not our real persons, and so just reach out and be empathetic. And
stay
I really appreciate
clear
it.
of storm drains with clowns in them.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Bye, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.